Thank you all so much for being here. My name's Ben. I'm a doctor by background, but I'm working in the go-to-market team at Heidi, and it's really going to be a pleasure to host you all this evening. I want to start just by acknowledging that we're on Wurundjeri country this evening and acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the audience and their elders past and present. Tonight, we're going to have a really incredible discussion on how Heidi's redefining healthcare today. And you're not going to have to hear from me. We've got a panel of three incredible guests who are going to help us kind of explore that topic. I want to make a few kind of declarations off the top of this evening. It's not going to be a product demo. It's not going to be a hard sell. If you would like a demo, we've got a demo station up here later, so we're happy to take any of your questions or troubleshoot with you and things like that. But really, we just want to explore, one, how you can get comfortable with Heidi, how you can maybe roll Heidi out into your practice, and what we're really excited about on our roadmap that's to come. So hopefully it'll be a really enjoyable panel. So without any further ado, if I could get our panelists to come up and join me. I'm going to hand you this microphone. Just pass it around. Oh, sorry, you just need to turn it on. Yeah, I'm not sure. That's all right. Take a seat. You don't have to take a seat in the order of your names on the screen. Awesome. So let's have this discussion. We've got Todd Scarce, who's a physiotherapist and COO of Kaiser, which is awesome to have Todd here. We've got Dr. Ian Turner, who's an emergency physician and who's an emergency physician and head of department at Cabrini. And finally, we've got Dr. Charles Kuntz, who's a specialist veterinary surgeon at Animal Emergency Centre. So please join me in making them welcome. And I think a nice way to get started is really, I want to ask the three of you your Heidi origin story. So where you first discovered Heidi, and kind of take us back to the very beginning. Charles.
This is Mike. Yep. So I was in New Zealand at a conference, and a guy that was sitting across from me said, "Oh, we've been trying some AI transcription software." This was about a year and a half ago, and he said we tried this one called Heidi. It was really amazing, and blah blah blah. Even you could talk to clients about your camping trip that you took, and it would filter out all that information and come up with a perfect medical record. And he said, but it was too expensive for our practice. And I was like, wow. And I went back and looked it up, and it was $800 a year. And I said, vets are so cheap. And I just couldn't believe that, like instantly, I think within 2 days, I wrote an email to Tom and Leah, and I said, this is going to change the lives of vets all over the world. And how can I help you get the word out? So vets have a huge issue with mental health. I'm sure that all of you have heard about it. And it's just being under-resourced. Underpaid, overworked, and I just think it would be a real opportunity to change the lives for the better of vets.
Good evening, everyone. My origin story with Heidi was about 2.5 years ago. There was some negative press about some physicians in Western Australia who used ChatGPT to generate discharge summaries for their patients. And in our department, we were quite interested in that because we didn't want our doctors to start doing that without any proper governance. We ended up doing a research project on that topic that was published earlier this year. And about 6 months later, I was at an event up in Brizzy with a few other ED physicians. And one of them said, oh, you might be interested in this chap that I know who works for some company called Heidi. And that was Harry, so some of you might have met him. Where are you, Harry? He's here somewhere. There he is, up the back. And then that led to a couple of really productive conversations and real level of obviousness that the product would be really useful in our ED. And then about 5 months of very hard work at our end to convince our executive team, our IT team and our legal team to trial the product, which we did in January of this year and had some great outcomes.
Thank you. Ours is interesting. It was probably driven from the ground up by a couple of our clinicians, actually, initially, that brought it to our attention that this type of software existed and was improving their client care because they could be more present in their consultations, and was cutting down on their admin time and really enhancing their enjoyment of their roles because they weren't stuck doing admin after hours, etc. So yeah, it was driven by them in terms of trialling a couple of different softwares, and so we just started to investigate what was out there, and pretty quickly came across Harry and Yoav, and then was introduced to Hugo after that, and we did trial a few different platforms before making the decision. But we were really impressed with the accuracy of Heidi, the professionalism of the team, and that made the decision pretty easy in the end. So we've been on board now. I was joking with Harry earlier that we piloted for a long time before we made a decision, and we were very conservative with the direction we were going to take. So we've probably been on board for 12 months now, and we've got 31 clinics and about 300 clinicians on the platform now. So we've been rolling that out segmentally, and we've now got all our clinicians on board, and have done for the last 6 months. So yeah, that's our story.
Awesome. I think with AI, particularly in healthcare, we know that privacy, security, it's top of mind, and certainly the ChatGPT stories still give us all a bit of cause for concern. But the question I have for you all is, how did you get comfortable with the technology and from a security point of view? Because it's going to be very difficult to roll it out if you don't have that peace of mind.
We're probably fortunate. We developed our own practice management software. So we have a tech team. We've got a CIO. So we relied heavily on him and his word, and he was pretty impressed with Heidi right from the beginning. Said the professionalism once again stood out. So he had great confidence, and I'm a clinician, I'm a physio by background, so not a tech expert, not a security expert. So we just relied on him and his guidance, and his tick of approval was enough for us.
That was similar with our experience as well. I'm a tech enthusiast, but not an expert. And particularly in emergency medicine, emergency clinicians can be quite keen to adopt new technologies, so you've got to be careful of managing that risk. In our organisation, we are somewhat risk adverse. Our board has got a low risk tolerance for new technologies, but luckily we've got a fantastic IT team that was able to do all of the appropriate due diligence and security checks, making sure Heidi was compliant with the Australian privacy principles and all the other regulatory requirements. So luckily I didn't have to do all of that legwork. I had a team to be able to do it, but it was a few months of work to be able to get our organisation to be comfortable with using the product.
And in vet, we don't have quite the rigorous requirements for privacy that they do in human medicine. And I just got assurances from talking to you guys that it was held up to standards of human medicine, and so I thought that it would be no problem for us. And then when I was trying to negotiate an enterprise agreement for the corporation that I work for, which is 260 vet practices in Australia, they were very concerned about security, and and our IT team went into quite a bit of detail, and we're very confident.
Awesome. So for those of you with an IT team, they'll be happy. In terms of there's the flip side of that argument. I think the reason Heidi's been so popular, and Todd, maybe the reason so many of your clinicians were using it before you knew about it, is that there's a real need. I think we're all very aware of the workload increasing year on year for all clinicians, regardless of whether you're in private practice or in the hospital. I'd love to hear that first moment of Heidi where you recognised, wow, this could actually change my practice in terms of I remember when I was working in ED, I was blown away. I was like, oh my God, I can just go see the next patient in a couple of minutes, which was pretty mind blowing. So yeah.
I'm in my work day, I have to communicate with clients, I have to do surgery, and then I have to work with my team, and I have to write medical records. And I'm a great communicator, I'm a good surgeon, terrible at medical records. And literally had, problems in my former practice where people are like, oh, this is a Charles case. We're not going to know what complications he's talked to the owners about. I was working Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and if a patient had a major complication on Thursday or Friday, I wasn't working. They had to deal with the clients. They weren't sure whether I'd communicated with them about whether this was even a possibility, that kind of thing. When I first tried Heidi for the first time, I was just like shaking. I couldn't believe that all my problems are going to be solved in that regard, because again, I love doing surgery. I love talking to clients, but I hate doing medical records. And at the end of the day, I suddenly realized that I could just go home. I had no medical records to do. I didn't have to go back and think 5 hours before what I said to a client. The other thing is that I noticed that if I say something, it just appears in the medical records. So I say even more than I ever did before, because I know I can just mention a complication and there it is in the medical record. And so that was just a real mind-blown moment for me, where now I walk into a room and literally people are saying, oh, Charles has the best medical records in the practice, which is just it's like little Jack Horner who stuck in his thumb and pulled out a plum and said, what a good boy am I. I was, just such a new, novel feeling for me to feel like I was in control of my medical records, and so much so that people were actually talking about it. So,
I guess when I first used the product, I wasn't as surprised as Charles, because I played around with a few other products, played around with ChatGPT like a lot of people do in an amateur fashion. But what impressed me was the accuracy and how consistent the product, the outputs of the product were in the way that I would usually write my notes. And this was even without using templates that were suited to my style of writing. And that was pretty much the general experience of all of my clinicians who used the product during our pilot period. They were coming to me on their first shift saying, this is fantastic, it's made a huge difference. There was one doctor in particular who I thought would take a little bit longer to adapt to it. He's not a fan of new technology. He would love writing his notes in the room on paper and then going and transcribing them on the computer. And he came into my office about a week into the pilot and just made the comment, and these were his exact words because I remember them. He said, I feel like I'm practicing medicine again. So he really loved it, and he ended up being our second highest user of the product out of 54 clinicians we had using it.
Great story, Ian. The wow moment for me probably came in the initial chat with Harry and Yoav in our clinic where I got to trial it. So I did a mock consultation with Yoav as a client, and I tried different softwares, as we said, and I was blown away by the accuracy compared to those other pieces of software. So that was the first wow moment. And then once we started to get into the templates, we run multidisciplinary clinics where we've got physios working with EPs, working with exercise scientists, all in the one clinic. So there's lots of handover notes. And as a clinician, having worked in our environment for years, I was similar to Charles, where I'd often miss handover notes, and it wasn't great for client care, and so the administrative burden was really high. But once we started to get into the template mode of creating those templates, and I recognised how just immediately you could click a button and all of a sudden your handover note's done to your exercise physiologist or your exercise scientist. I was just blown away by the efficiency of that, and our clinicians have all been the same. They're not taking work home anymore. They're just blown away by not only the accuracy but also just how clever it is with the templates.
Awesome. And it's something that we really encourage everyone to do. I think there's a lot of people here that might be still exploring scribes, and we really encourage you to try all of them and see what's best. And I think the thing that I want to kind of touch on, Todd, and you kind of already started to answer that question, is how you started interacting with the product, whether it be a mock consultation or even just talking to yourself. How did you find that process and trying to roll it out across your organisation? Did any tips or words of wisdom to kind of get your clinicians through that first consultation, maybe?
Yeah, definitely know it yourself. So that wasn't the only mock consultation I did with Yoav. Extended that and started using it with clients that I was still seeing at the time, and got familiar with it myself. But then we got a few champions on board. We have a few super users basically within our group that were just the word spread really quickly once they started using it, on how effective it was and how much they were enjoying it. So if you've got a larger organisation, I'd just get a few people that are, have that mindset of quick adoption, and let them become the champions of the product. And that's worked really well to get widespread adoption.
Awesome.
Yeah, similar for us as well. When we started the pilot, we were very lucky that the Heidi team spent quite a lot of time with our team for about 3 to 4 weeks leading up to the pilot, training up the team, sort of one-on-one sessions, group sessions, but also identifying those who would be advocates for the product and super users, as Todd described. And then they were available to be, obviously we're a 24-hour service, to support their colleagues who might not be as familiar with it when using it on night shift. So what was the beginning of the question?
Yeah, just how you got your staff comfortable with it. Yeah.
That's how we got them comfortable with it. We also, we're a training site as well, so we have a lot of registrars who are training for their exams, and we would get them to use Heidi for their mock exam consultations. So they'd be able to see what they actually said, what was recorded, and how to actually get their consultation into a better format, and so they actually learnt from it. So that was a good, safe way to test the product. And then clinicians were just practicing it at home as well with their families. We said, give it a go at home, do mock consultations, and that skilled them up really quickly.
I installed it on my computer and walked into my first consult. I think the span of time was about 10 minutes. And just hit go, and then, this must be how you stop, and click stop, and all of a sudden my whole consultation was perfectly transcribed. And that was in the SOAP format, so subjective, objective, assessment, and plan. And so I created my own template so that it matched up better with our practice management software. And then, I went to Singapore to do a locum about a week after that, working with a friend of mine who's an internal medicine specialist who's French, and I cannot understand her on the best of days. She has such a strong French accent. And Heidi understood her much better than I did. And so I would just carry Heidi around and translate for me what she was saying. And even in the, in the consults where in Singapore, there is still somewhat of a language, I guess a language barrier to some degree, and Heidi had no problem translating all of that. So I was very, very quickly, I got the whole practice in Singapore converted while I was up there for 3 weeks, and then came back and started working on the corporation. So.
Amazing. So you're the super user on the panel then. Yeah. There's the clinicians in this side of the picture, and then the other side of this is the patients. And I know I was a bit anxious when I first started using it, going from kind of mock consultation to using it in practice. You're never really sure what your patients are going to say and how they're going to receive it. What have you observed, and what have you heard from colleagues in your departments or in your clinics? How have your patients received Heidi?
So my patients don't mind at all, but the pet owners, I just say, do you mind if I use AI to transcribe notes on our consultation? And it just means that I'll be able to concentrate on you and on your pet rather than on taking notes. And I've never had anybody. I've done about 800 consults on Heidi in the last year, and I haven't had a single person reject it. The other thing that's really nice is that I've created a template. So often people travel from a couple of hours away, and we'll do surgery on the same day as the first consult for a cruciate, knee reconstruction or whatever. At the end of the consult, I've created a template which is patient admission form for owner, and then I just have Heidi fill that out during the consultation, hand the keyboard to the owner, they put in their email address, and so something that's a highly emotionally charged situation, they can't really listen to what you're saying, they're worried about their dog, the dog's agitated and upset. It gives them something that they can go home and sit at the dining room table and read exactly what's going to happen to their pet on that day, explain it to family members, because of course there are going to be 10 family and friends that are interested in what's happening to, to Rebel or whatever. And so it really gives them something that tangible that they can take home and read over and understand what's going to happen. So I've never, only glowing reports from my pet owners. So.
Similar for us as well. So during our pilot period, we had about 800 patients who had an AI-generated note. We had a quite rigorous consent process, so all patients at the time of registration were given a patient explainer about what the product was, what the safety features were, what would happen with their data, where it would be stored. They could ask us questions. We trained up the staff to be able to answer those questions, gave the staff, 2 or 3 page FAQs so that they'd be able to answer those questions. And then it'd be up to the individual clinician to then obtain verbal consent from the patient. Of those 800 consults, I think there was maybe 5 or so people who declined to participate, and that was fine. We just went back to our normal workflows. The patients were just quite happy to say, yep, that's fine. There weren't too many questions about it. I think that's in the setting of an emergency department where they're focused on other things. What was most interesting was when you showed the patients how the product worked. A lot of people were quite curious to say, they were saying, oh, what's it done? Because we're doing it on our phones, because our consults are obviously roaming around. We're not at a fixed desk. We're moving around from patient to patient. And you would just hold your phone up as the note was being generated. And patients were just shocked in a good way. And a lot of them commented, oh, this must be going to save you a lot of time.
Similar to Ian, we did a lot of prep work with our clinicians so they had knowledge of where the data was stored and all those frequently asked questions. But we haven't had anyone refuse, any client refuse, both within the pilot and afterwards. And in fact, we've actually had only positive feedback where clients have reported that their clinician is more present in the consultation because they're not buried in their computer. And also they also appreciate that there's a medical letter that's been able to be generated straight away after their consultation. And we do a lot of, obviously, like all clinicians, treatment planning over long periods of time. And so to have a template be able to be produced at the time rather than afterwards makes us look really good and efficient, and clients love it.
Awesome. And I think I want to pull on the thread of templates a little bit, because I think they're really the magic that allows 3 of you doing very different roles in very different settings to kind of all use Heidi and have a similar great experience, but a note that kind of works. For those maybe who are new to Heidi, Todd, do you want to just explain what a template is and maybe the learning curve in terms of how hard was it to make a couple of custom templates?
Well, we had guidance. We had
Yoav
and Hugo, who guided us through the creation of our templates. But basically, the template pulls the relevant information from. Well, first of all, you got a template for the clinical note, but then subsequent templates like how you want to produce a medical letter. I mentioned our handover notes between our clinicians. Just mentioned the treatment plans. That can all be customised to your needs. And we're a unique environment where, as I said, we're multidisciplinary. We're in a strength training environment as well, where we've got unique machines that have references, and the templates pick up those references and go into detail. So you can really dive deep. So we spent quite some time during the pilot period with Hugo developing those templates. And it was worth it for the rollout, because that's really what got our clinicians on board, was where they could see the software was actually customised to their needs. So, yeah, if you're wanting to get adoption, I think spending some good time on your templates is worthwhile.
I'm not the expert to talk about templates. The reason for that is we purposely limited the amount of templates we were using, because we were doing a pilot and we were wanting to use the results of the pilot to inform further decisions with using either Heidi or another product. We wanted to standardise what was being outputted by our medical staff, which was worthwhile doing because it meant that the data that we collected was a bit more robust. However, a lot of the doctors were saying, oh, I'd really like it if it was more in my style. Some doctors prefer to use you mentioned using SOAP as a pretty standard approach to writing your notes. Some of my ED colleagues like to write in prose. They like to write a note that's a lot like a clinic letter. And we purposely used a standard sort of SOAP template. So they weren't a big fan of that. But as we go on to use the product in the future, we'll be developing all of those other templates and the types that Todd's referred to. We're particularly keen for not just the generation of notes and discharge summaries and referral letters, but patient explainers that can be bespoke, can be in simple language. That's a lot of the time that we spend at the moment in our discharge process with patients is 10, 20 minutes of collecting the correct documentation for them. Being able to condense that down to a small amount of time is going to be a significant change for us.
In the way that I was using it probably by myself in the practice for 6 months or something. And at the bottom of I don't know if you've seen the interface, but at the bottom it says, "Ask Heidi anything," I think is the wording. And so I had a lot of fun with it. And I would say, okay, write a letter to a physio referring this dog that's had a knee reconstruction. And it would write a letter beautifully with all my history and physical and everything. And then you just basically, I don't know if it's clicking a box or whatever, but you can just say, turn this into a template. And then it pulls out all the specific information, and then you can apply it to any other patient you want later on just from one good question. I had another case where because I YouTube stream some of my surgeries for people to learn how to do surgery in developing countries, and I just had Heidi running in the background, and then when I was finished with the surgery, I said, write an operative report. And just from listening to me on YouTube, it wrote a perfect operative report. It knew what suture material I'd asked for and all that stuff, and then I could easily turn that into a template. So it really is, if you have the freedom, I don't know if like organizations are going to let you upload templates for everybody to use that you create, but you can come up with some really interesting ones. Like I had one where I had a client and their 10-year-old child was in there with us, and I was explaining, I think it was adrenal tumors or something, to the owners, and then I said, write another patient information form, but explain it to a 10-year-old, and boom, perfect. And use terminology that a 10-year-old could understand. So I have actually quite a bit of fun with it, and try a lot of different things. So.
Yeah, that Ask Heidi is my favourite feature. I agree. It's a lot of fun. You can write stories with Bluey explaining diagnoses to kids and stuff. So you're instantly every 5-year-old's favourite clinician, which is good fun. The other, I think, thing that other than templates to customize, we've got a style, so you can kind of, I'm a bullet points, very brief kind of guy. I don't like prose, but I think having that ability to maybe give people some of the option in terms of writing paragraphs, full sentences, or kind of keeping it really brief is maybe meant that people feel a little bit more comfortable trusting it. I'd love to kind of get your take, and you kind of mentioned it before, even with the standard template that you were using without customization, how did you find that kind of style feature and scribe feature?
Yeah, that was really useful. So for those who haven't used it, click a button, it'll change the note that you've generated from you've got an ED background, Ben, so like you, I like bullet points, that's how I think. But there are times where you want to have a lot more nuance and show that you've really considered what you've done, and you want to show what your thinking behind your decision making is and what you've communicated. Normally, I would write that sort of documentation in prose form. So I would just click the button to flick it to the mode. Is it the left brain, right brain setup? And I can't remember all of the different modes. But then it would put it into a more prose form that reflected what my decision making was. And also, being a director of a department and being well aware of complaints, clinical governance, safety, being able to document in that fashion makes any issues that might come up in the future much more defensible.
Next question I had was about integrations. I know it's a question that we get off the bat, and we've got a integration next approach, I guess, at Heidi, so we're not necessarily immediately integrated with all of the electronic records. How did you approach that? Were we integrated with your system from the start? Yeah, I know Todd's got a bespoke question, but...
I'll try not to steal the limelight, our hospital doesn't have a whole of hospital EMR. It's got like a patient management system, so you can track where your patients go, it can track all the financial side of things, but it's not built like an Epic or a Cerner. Luckily, within our ED, we do have a module built within that essentially acts as an EMR, so most of the work we can do is digital. But because it's an older type of product, wasn't a sort of product where we can easily integrate Heidi into it without there being a significant cost at our end. But luckily, the way our EMR and the ED is set up, all of our notes are free text. So it was very easy just to have the app running You do the consultation in the patient's room. You then go to your desktop where you're going to be doing your notes, open up your account there. Your notes are there, and it was after you've done your review and edit of the notes, a quick copy and paste, and it's into our system. So that was quite easy. One of the things that I could see as a challenge for us in our setting is generating those other documents, particularly the referral letters, the discharge summaries, and being able to then make sure they're appropriately stored and matched to your patient within your practice management software or your EMR. That's not something that's easy for us to do in our setting. It's quite manual. Our doctors would have to upload the document themselves, and they're not going to do that. And if they are, they're going to do it about 20% of the time. But we're lucky we've just had an upgrade to our IT system, so which has solved what I thought was going to be a difficult problem about a week ago. So we'll be able to just upload the note and the other documents that we've generated within Heidi straight into the patient's EMR section within our ED. But if we didn't have that, we would have to come up with a lot of workarounds. So that's something to consider, depending whether you've got a practice management software or in a larger organisation, is how you're going to integrate it and how you're going to keep the use of the product going throughout the patient's care journey.
We don't have Heidi integrated yet into our practice management software. As I mentioned before, we've got a bespoke software that we've created ourselves, but it's not at a point, we're just in a transition where we're updating it, so we're not going to integrate until we've done that update. But it hasn't impacted our use of the software. It's similar to what Ian just mentioned. Our clinicians just copy and paste the different templates that they've got available. But I can't wait till it's integrated, because I think that's just going to remove another barrier and another step in the process. So looking forward to that, which is hopefully only a couple of months away for us.
We are not integrated yet into our EMR, but ours is a text-based, so we can copy and paste as well. So it hasn't been. One, I guess, kind of nuance is that for some reason our IT group has our EMR running in remote desktop, so you have to log into a remote desktop. And there was a challenge. People were thinking, okay, you have a Heidi working outside of the remote desktop, and you have the EMR working inside, and you can't copy and paste easily. So I had the workaround, which is just to open up an instance of Heidi within the remote desktop from Chrome, and that just goes back and forth really easily. There.
Awesome. I think you've all got the benefit of being on the other side of rolling out Heidi into your practice and into your clinics and departments. I think in terms of like change management and managing expectations, what advice would you give to people perhaps 12 months or a bit further along behind you in your journey, in terms of any wisdom, anything you wish you could have done better or thought about a little bit sooner?
Having a copy and paste setting is actually beneficial, because you're not going to screw anything up. If you don't like what it generates, you don't have to put it into the record, and just have a play with it. Like you're not going to break it, and just try some things, try some templates, and just, I think that the people that are skeptics really have just not tried it. I think once you try it, you're just going to be like, oh my God, my life is so much better. So.
I agree with the comment about skeptics. I think if you're working in a larger organisation and you're someone who's advocating to try to bring in this sort of product, don't underestimate the amount of work you have to do to get your organisation to buy in. You have to work with all of the different stakeholders. I commented before, exec, IT, legal, cybersecurity, everyone who's got a role in the digital space, and digital is everywhere now, so everyone has a role in it. You've got to get them on board first. You don't want to roll something out and it go wrong in the first couple of weeks, because those people who are the skeptics or were keen for it not to work will say, we're not going to allow you to introduce it and continue with the product.
I'd also just add to that, lean on the Heidi team. Like Hugo and Yoav have had extensive experience rolling out for different organisations and of different sizes, so we lent on them. We're
very nice. We're here to help.
Absolutely. A great landing page for our clinicians. All the material was there. They made it really easy. We lent on them heavily. to guide us. We also then had the champions, and those champions were non-leaders deliberately. They were clinicians, and they definitely weren't directors, owners of any of the businesses that we've got. So that helped, I think, having the team on the ground really championing the software. And then we came up with a good comms plan. We had a hype reel and really got behind it and celebrated it as a real milestone in our tech journey.
Yeah, awesome. I guess like a little bit of a hot take. I know like I've read a lot of notes in my time, oftentimes when something needs to happen really quickly and they're not necessarily that great. So I guess, are we overthinking it a little bit in terms of our hesitation or in terms of just the impact just a really structured, comprehensive note can have in terms of not just your individual session with a patient, but also in delivering their care kind of longer term?
I mentioned that we're a multidisciplinary clinic, lots of handovers between clinicians. We have a team approach to client care, so there's a lot of handing of clients between, both interdiscipline and intra. So it's really helped us. The more comprehensive the note, the better. The more comprehensive the care. So it's been great for that. And also for our clinicians, that if you make scant notes, you're not going to remember exactly what you did. So I think, yeah, as long as it's not too over the top and you can adjust the template to suit your style and you don't have to dig for information through the note for your next session, then it's nothing but positive.
Echo what Todd has said. For us as well, it was about communication within our other staff groups. So in our setting, our nurses rely heavily upon what the medical staff have documented in their notes. Sometimes we don't get to the nurse quick enough to communicate our plan because we get distracted and get taken off elsewhere and they're not sure what's going on. The approach that we had when we implemented Heidi was that we made sure that the doctors using it were generating their first note and putting it straight into the system, not waiting until the end of their patient encounter, which could go for 4 or 5 hours. So we're getting the note in early. The data we got showed that the doctors who were using AI-generated notes were getting their notes in 30 minutes quicker than when they were writing their own notes. And that just meant earlier communication to the nursing staff. That meant implementation of treatment plans earlier. So for us, that was a significant benefit to the product.
And we have said that the day team is surgery and the night team is the emergency hospital. And so we have to transfer our patients to the emergency hospital overnight. And then they transfer them back in the morning. And so again, I do my records either in the consult room or when I get back to my desk in my office. And so the more information that I give the emergency hospital, the less likely they are to have to call me in the middle of the night for clarification about stuff. And so if I do it immediately as I finish the consult, then everybody in the hospital can just look at my records and notes and know exactly what I communicated with the client, exactly what complications I'm concerned about. I do my operative report as well at the same time, so everything is just available and makes basically a seamless transition from day to night staff. So
awesome. We're really excited that we've moved beyond just being an AI scribe. We've just launched calls. We've got tasks and coding, and I guess we're really bullish on other avenues and areas in which AI can kind of transform the way we deliver care. Whilst they're all in early stages, I'd love to hear from each of you what you're most excited about, whether it be one of those features or potentially something that you would turn your mind to and kind of say in 5 years' time, I'd love this to be kind of ever present in your departments or where you work.
So my whole business is based on referrals and rapport and relationships with the referring veterinarians. And so having things like a bank maybe of photographs within Heidi that I could say, okay, this is a cruciate ligament rupture and we're doing a tibial plateau leveling osteotomy, and it could automatically drop an image of that procedure demonstrating that, or maybe links to YouTube videos that demonstrate those procedures or whatever, would be really cool. Also maybe integrating some AI into potentially assisting you with additional diagnostic tests, or have you thought about this? Like if it's listening the whole time and a light comes off and you haven't mentioned a potential differential diagnosis, it might get a little pink light that comes on and you click on it and it says, have you thought about doing this? or this diagnostic test or whatever. That would be really cool.
There's a few things that obviously you're already doing and things that I'm looking forward to. The task lists in particular, obviously for individuals being able to generate your note, and then from that note comes, you've got your 3 tasks to do for this patient, and they can be then added to the other tasks that you have to do. That's great for your time management in emergency. But if you can then also combine that with the team that you're working with, if you have team access, so if you've got your nurse in charge of a department who can then see what are the tasks of all the individuals who are working and which ones need to be prioritised, that would make a big difference to patient flow, which is incredibly important in the emergency department. Moving away from the clinical side, for us obviously in a private organisation, billing's important, coding's important. I touched on the fact that our organisation doesn't have a whole of hospital electronic medical record. In fact, on the wards we are very paper-based. And have you all read doctors' handwriting? So we get a lot of feedback from our coders that there's a lot of diagnoses, comorbidities or complications that they can't code for because they can't read the notes. And that obviously has an impact upon what we can then bill for. So being able to use a product that can generate a discharge summary at the end of a patient ED visit or a hospital episode of care that's very clear with the comorbidities, the diagnoses, the treatments, and that can go direct to the coders. It shortens your revenue cycle, you're going to optimise your revenue. So I think that's going to be a significant impact for organisations, and for the organisations that might be a little bit hesitant about implementing AI scribes just for the clinician benefit, the return on investment for them is going to be in this side where they're going to be able to generate more revenue.
Concur, really keen to get tasks up and going once we integrate into our software, so that's exciting for us. Even the PDF filler is exciting for us. A lot of our third parties require PDF documents for their report, so I'm looking forward to getting that up and going. We're not on board with that yet. We are very keen on producing research from our clinical consultations, and I'm really excited to see in future the potential of turning our free text notes into more structured clinical notes that can be interrogated through research, because I'm really keen. We've got a research department, really keen for them to be able to interrogate what we're doing clinically and produce research which might feed back into the way our clinicians treat in clinic. We might be able to provide them with some predictions on what they should be considering with their treatment based on that clinical research. So I'm excited by that potential.
Cool. There's lots of cool stuff there. And yeah, we're really excited by it too. I think a final question before I get Tom to join us up and talk about maybe the roadmap and colour that in a little bit more detail. We've spoken a lot about the impact it has on clinical practice, on patient care, and even your patient's experience of it. There's a lot in the media at the moment, and I think we're all aware that workforce shortages, mental health, and just generally the grind of working clinically is front of mind. And do you think Heidi is kind of helping kind of shift that, making the work more sustainable? And have you kind of seen or heard that in your organisations?
That's the primary reason we introduced it, was for our clinicians, and the average career span for a physio in private practice is only about 6 years, and administrative burden would definitely be part of that, the reason why. So yeah, that was one of the main reasons, and our organisation is particularly administrative heavy, so it's been very positively received from our clinicians, so yeah, which is great so far.
Similar, one of the reasons I wanted to bring it in was to just lessen that documentation burden for my staff. Sometimes feel like every month there's a new document that's added in that we have to fill out, a new checkbox that we have to tick. We surveyed all of our clinicians who participated during the pilot, sort of pre and post as to their level of joy at work, how tired they felt at the end of the day, did they feel more productive? And across all those domains, there was a significant improvement with the use of Heidi. Looking at the actual hard data of productivity, we weren't more productive in that we weren't getting patients out of the ED any quicker, but there are so many other factors in the ED environment that's not just about how quickly you get a note documented as to how fast you get a patient out. Might be very different in an outpatient clinic setting, but in the ED we didn't see that, so we really lent upon what the clinician experience was to try to convince our exec to continue on with using the product. One thing I would caution those of you in bigger organisations who are looking at bringing it in, don't let your staff think you're trying to do it to force them to be more productive. And that's not why we brought it in, but some people were worried, oh, you're going to be setting me higher KPIs, you're going to expect me to see more patients per hour. It's not about that, it's about the better quality of notes, it's about them being more refreshed. And longer term, from a staff engagement point of view, we would hope that we would see improvement in metrics in staff retention, ability to recruit. You know, if you're an organisation that says, come work in our emergency department, we give you access to an AI scribe for every shift that you do, that's going to make us a preferable employer to someone else.
So I'm a poster child for imposter syndrome. And I really struggle, like if I have a client complaint or something like that, I'm like if I have something that goes badly, that can set me off for a month. I was about to go on a holiday with my wife for 6 weeks to Europe, and I had a client write a letter saying that our dog died and unfortunately had a heart-based tumor, like it wasn't going to go well no matter what. And she said, you didn't explain all this stuff about potential outcomes to us, and we want all our money back, and if you don't comply, we're going to complain to the vet board. And so, and that would literally have ruined my 6-week holiday in the past. What I did was pulled up the Heidi transcript, copied and pasted into the letter back to the owner and said, this is where I said exactly what you're saying I didn't say, and this is where you said, oh, I understand, blah, 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 explained everything that I had actually talked to them about. And by the way, I sent a copy of this to the vet board so they know to expect it. And then I wrote the vet board and said, after they got that email, and said, look, I'm going to be on a holiday for 6 weeks. If they file a complaint, I'd like you maybe not to tell me about it until I'm back in 6 weeks. And they said, look, based on what you've sent us, we're not going to be contacting you. So that was just, I walked out of that situation. Instead of being basically a wreck for the next 6 months, I walked out high-fiving myself, you know, confident that I had done everything right and that I'd handled, you know, that I was on top of the situation. So that was a very personal situation where it was absolutely like life-changing.
Love that. That was awesome. Thanks for sharing. Tom, I'd love you to come down and join us at the front. For those of you who don't know, this is Dr. Tom Kelly. He's a co-founder and CEO. Tom, I'd love for you to just give us all a bit of a flavour of the roadmap. What's next?
Yeah, sure.
We've been frantically taking notes from these guys as they've been giving us their ideas, but I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone, for coming. I'm Tom. Nice to meet you all. Yeah, you guys did a good job laying out the roadmap, more or less. So, yeah, I think it's worth maybe just saying why we built Heidi in the first place. Maybe that's a helpful framing for what we're going to do next. So, I worked as a vascular surgery registrar. I never finished my training, not as esteemed as the people on this stage, but my experience in medicine was that I went into medicine because I really wanted to be the doctor that would help solve the problem for the patient in front of me, figure out what's going on, give them a clear plan, and walk out of the room and go see the next patient. Maybe do an operation in between if it was particularly exciting. And what often kind of belabors clinicians is just all of the work around the work. So it's actually not just documentation. I think when we're trained, we actually basically get a lot of information about how to navigate the systems. So for example, we know how to prosecute evidence. We know how to order investigations, interpret them, come up with a plan, how to explain it to a patient, how to explain it to a colleague. If I see a patient who has been sitting in bed for a while and seems a bit short of breath to my eyes, I know intuitively that I now have to do a Wells score and figure out if they have a pulmonary embolism. And I learned how to do that, but I still have to now sit down, figure out all their symptoms, read all their past medical history. Do they have factor V Leiden or some other unusual condition? I can't quite remember how to calculate this. What does my guideline say about what do I do if a patient has a PE? There's like this whole kind of web to navigate that gets in the way of me seeing the next patient. So now I'm sitting on a desk and I'm thinking about what to do next for somewhere between 5 minutes to an hour, depending on how complicated it is. And it's very, very clear to us how Heidi can help do a lot of those tasks in very safe, transparent tools. So it might sound complicated, but it's actually fairly simple. If you break down what clinicians do, there are some very clear behaviors and tools that you need to build to be able to support clinicians. So one of them that I'm very excited about is tasks. So we started to roll it out in a very simple way. At the end of every visit, we create all of the tasks that are derivative from that visit, so things that might need to happen next. We also cross off the things you have done, just to give you a sense of progress. We do get a lot of things done in our visits. And exactly what you said, Ian, to be able to share that with colleagues. The reason we want to do that is because we want Heidi to have an idea of all of the tasks that have to come next. So back to my example of the pulmonary embolism. If Heidi's listening to that visit, they can understand from the context of the visit that I'm considering this diagnosis. In order to confirm that diagnosis, I have to calculate a well score. In order to calculate a well score, I have to read the patient's medical history. I have to look up the guidelines in my hospital. I have to put that into a real calculator, not some sort of AI model calculator, like an actual calculator that, according to our guidelines and the well score, spits out a number. And then based on that number, I know exactly what to do next. And maybe it even dose adjusts my treatment for me using the calculator again. So there are these very clear steps, and they're all sort of derivative tasks that have to happen that I would have otherwise done. So I would have sat there and done these tasks. So basically what it will look like is a calculator is an example of a thing we will build. So we will build an AI calculator, ignoring all of the steps, just independent of anything. That would be quite useful to have an AI tool that says, hey, can you calculate a well score for this patient? Upload their record, or just based on a visit, and it'll give you an indicative score. Evidence is another one. So evidence for, you can imagine the world's medical knowledge all curated into that Ask Heidi area. So if you ask a question that is of diagnostic intent, or you're not sure about what to do next, we will collate both proprietary guidelines, so things where we've licensed access to those, maybe BMJ best practice, or the NICE guidelines, or up to date, or you name it, and maybe it'll be something that you have to have a license to that will surface right at the point of care. There could also be your organisation's guidelines. So in hospitals, there are specific care pathways, things you're meant to do if there's a sepsis patient or a patient who's presenting after a trauma. There's a way to treat that patient. And so for any doctor who's practicing and seeing that type of patient, we can surface that information to them at the point of care. They don't have to go searching or figuring out where those things are. In addition to all of these things, connecting all these things together is really important. So today, some of these features exist slightly in silos, and you can't quite collaborate across all of them. So I think the best collaboration features we have today are session sharing. So if you're in a team, you can see each other's sessions on Heidi and generate other documents. And this is useful if you have medical secretaries or registrars with consultants or outpatient clinics where you want to be able to share the work. But imagine you can share tasks. You could share the evidence query you did, the calculation you made, the call that Heidi had with the patient, either inbound or outbound, scheduling them or discussing how they're progressing since their emergency discharge. Basically, all this work around the work is what I want to build a tool that clinicians can delegate to Heidi. Completely supervised, you will see the steps that we take. Each of the tools we build will be independently useful on their own. But the kind of, I guess, most blue sky dream is that I walk in the room, I know exactly what to do. Like, I'm the supervising, steering clinician in the room. If I am tired, hungry, late, seeing a patient I'm maybe not familiar with, Heidi should be there to support me. So exactly that flagging system. Maybe if I'm about to do something critically dangerous, then we surface a relevant pop-up and say, hey, this patient has this, you're about to do this, that's dangerous because of this guideline. And it's this kind of like care partner, like, you know, the thing I bring to work, my stethoscope, Heidi, and I go see patients and I delegate all of the morass, the stuff that I hate, to Heidi, and anything that I find enjoyment from, I do. And there'll be I think each clinician will have this personal relationship with their own AI that supports them, almost as if you had a junior or a peer that's worked with you for a long time, kind of learned all your preferences, kind of knows how you treat and behave, and would safety net me, hey, don't cut that, that looks like a nerve, you know, the equivalent. And doing it in a really transparent, visible way. It will never be like a black box where you don't understand why Heidi is making a recommendation. And that's why evidence is so important and tasks are so important, because it makes everything transparent. It's like, Heidi's doing this set of tasks, are you okay? Heidi's going to ask you for permission on these tasks, like orders and labs and other things that could be dangerous. Heidi's doing this because here, click this reference and here's the guideline. So I think we already pretty solved on Scribe. Like, I think there's maybe 10 to 15% to go on making it better, but we can do most things already. It's really going to be about these next tools and stitching them all together into a very powerful tool for every clinician. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. And thanks for coming.
Amazing. Thanks, Tom.
Yeah.
Now's the time of the evening where you get to ask some questions. So yeah, sure, we'll kick things off.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time. I wanted to understand if Heidi was the first AI solution that your organizations implemented.
So in getting the enterprise agreement for Heidi and working with my corporation, I had to go through probably 3 or 4 other scribes and then objectively come up with the one that I thought was the most beneficial, because I had no formal relationship with Heidi at that time. We looked at a couple that were vet specific, which are all cutesy with little dogs and stuff, and it just did not have the level of professionalism and robustness that I think that we wanted. And so that's why we settled on Heidi.
Heidi's the only one we've formally trialled. We did informally play around with some of the other products that are out there. Todd, I think you touched on it before, but it was the professionalism of the Heidi team that really sold us on the product and the support that they were giving us. I'd also met with some other smaller companies, and it was pretty clear that Heidi was the more mature within the market, and that was best suited to what our needs were.
We did trial some other AI Scribe software.
Any other AI software?
Any
Other
AI
than
software.
Scribe?
Other than Scribe, no. Yeah, we didn't. We just tried other AI Scribes, and yeah, it was the professionalism and the accuracy that got us across the line.
Awesome.
Do you have procedures where your clinicians have to check what's been written, or is there a, perhaps with time being very, very limited, that you just assume everything's accurate, they move on?
That's definitely a risk that we considered in implementing AI Scribe. But we've trained our clinicians that it's their responsibility to ensure accuracy. So it's part of their process that they check before, and the copy and paste probably helps that as well. I think Charles mentioned that earlier.
I might also comment on that. So every AI note that was generated had to have a disclaimer down the bottom that acknowledged that we'd obtained patient consent, but also that the clinician had read through, checked the notes, and that they were accurate. And it's in our system, it's the clinician who's signing off that it's their note. So they've got the responsibility for it. So that's how we safeguarded that. And our clinicians are quite adept at doing that. And when you think about it, I remember doing ward rounds when I was a registrar, and I would have a medical student write the notes for me. I wouldn't necessarily check them. So I think this actually is a more robust process for checking the quality of what the outputs are.
I would just say that in terms of our terms of use policy, it's a point of practice that you should review every note. We don't protest to get the perfect note every time, despite the fact that we'd love to. The benefit is really in the time saving and getting it, as close to perfect, as consistent as we can. And really it is always the clinician using its responsibility to check and verify, and the time saving comes from not having to actually physically write the note. I'll get you next. I think,
Hi, I'm relatively new to Heidi, and this is more a question for the creators. Obviously, this is a tool to assist the clinicians with making the notes and reports, but I'm wondering if there's a direction towards making other admin tasks easier. For example, I'm a psychiatrist and we have a practice where we get lots of GP referrals and patients fill out forms. Whether in the future or even now, there's the opportunity to integrate the information into a template that we can then use before we even start seeing the patient, if something like that is potentially in the works, because I would love to see that.
Yeah, 100%. So calls is a bad name. So thinking about those tools, one of the key things is being able to communicate with the patient. So when I think of calling, I just think of Heidi can communicate with patients. So practically that means that current use cases, you can create a phone agent, so you can have a conversation with Heidi, like voice to voice, and then summarize that before visits. So it could be that, before every visit, like send a text with a phone number and say, hey, please, like whatever you want to discuss in the visit, please have a conversation with Heidi beforehand. Obviously, phone might not be the best modality for that for everyone. So there'll be different ways to do that. So it could be via text, it could be in like a web form. And then this is a good example of where we have to link the product. So today we have those sessions and we have templates. So you should be able to apply any template to a call that's happened or to a patient intake that's been done. Definitely yes. More and more. Usually we try to solve try to create like some real uplift. You could probably sort of do something like this with like an online form creator. So the question we always ask is like, how is this 2 to 3 times better with Heidi doing it? And to us, the magic of AI is taking unstructured data and making it structured. So like if you have a form, Heidi could guide a patient through that form, but actually make it feel very organic. Like it doesn't look like a 20 questionnaire that you have to get through. But yeah, short answer is yes, we try to do these things.
I think that's also a great example of context. So for instance, if you've got a referral letter, a lengthy kind of mental health referral, mental health care plan, K10, everything like that, you can put all of those documents into context and you can ask Heidi to summarise that before you've seen the patient. I've got some friends that are surgical registrars. They put all of the scans, clinic results, clinic notes, consent, and then they get a little paragraph summary of each case so that they know what's going on for each patient rather than having to kind of filter through all of that. And context, I think, was a great, that will continue to grow in terms of usability and stuff. So you can do that. I'll get to yours.
Yeah, hi, I'm Grant Blashke. I'm a GP in South Melbourne and Associate Professor at Melbourne Uni. Really a bit of a Heidi fan, really enjoying it. Question about clinical governance, and particularly to Ian, I'm embarrassed at my level of governance when I hear how careful it sounds like you're being to get the clinical governance right. And I guess for a lot of people using it, small clinic, it's open Google Chrome, type Heidi, off you go. It could be that limited and hopefully more than that. But so just a question about how you see this playing out for clinical governance more generally, because you've sort of been down that road.
I think there'll be an inflection point and, in 5 years, this will be standard practice. Everyone's going to be using it and it'll just be part of regular clinical governance, and we probably won't be quite as robust as we're being at the moment, because at the moment, still for a lot of people, it's a bit of an unknown, and for us, it was about making our organisation feel comfortable. In so far as you said, in your setting where more isolated, you don't have the backup of a large organisation, I think it's still such a good product that just the checking of your own notes yourself and reading through it is the simplest safety feature. And of course, getting from your patient's really important too. Some simple things you could do, and that we'll be doing on a larger basis, is auditing all of the notes on a regular basis. So every month we'll be taking a random selection of generated notes. We'll have a clinician reviewing them, cross-matching that against the other clinical information we've got in our system, and we'll also be able to go back and look at the original transcript if we decide to keep it for that long and see if what was recorded in the room matches with what we expect to be the output. So that's obviously a lot of work to do, but you could just choose to do that on 2 of your sessions a month as a starting point, just to get a bit of safety in there.
I've been using Heidi for 12 months, and yes, I really enjoy it. And I had a moment where I said to myself, I can go home because I've never been home. Like if I finish at 5, I never home see my kid, and then my children are like, oh, this is the best, whatever. But I have a question about the transcript. How long are we meant to keep that, or should we keep it at all? Because when I say to my patient, oh, this is recorded, but after I finish this for myself, it will all be destroyed. But of course, like, it has saved me, my ass, when I forgot, and I was too tired, and I thought, oh, I forgot. So I went back to the and then found the little bit of information that I got, and I put it in there. And then if I have to erase that, do you keep it or not?
Yeah, I can take this one. So, so exactly what you described is the, I guess, the balance we try to strike. So you don't have to do anything. That transcript is part of your, can be, if you want, part of your clinical record. So you're welcome to store it. It can be part of the consent. Like, we transcribe the visit. It just keeps the transcript, so you can say that, and the note, but there's no audio recording. There's no voice of the visit. And we do have different organizations that have completely polarized perspectives. So some fairly want to drop the transcript very quickly after the notes are generated. Others will store the transcripts actually forever, basically, because they want to do clinical research. They want to look at patterns of practice, look at like consensus, like how do cardiologists treat this or that in our organization. And this is my personal opinion. Like when I was doing surgical consents, I used to record them. I would ask the patient for consent, but I wanted that as a record of what I had done because I'd generally done a good job. So I do think, well, I think so. So I do think actually for most clinicians, most of the time, when we get into litigation and we get into trouble, more often the case is that we don't have good evidence of what we did do. Like you're more often getting into a situation, like you said, where a patient's making a complaint and you didn't document the exact thing they're complaining about, and so you're in a bit of a pickle now because you can't go back and edit your notes, but you know what you did, but it's he said, she said kind of situation. So if it was me, I would actually store those transcripts because they're really useful, and that's why we give people the option. But it really depends on personal practice and the organization where you work. And I'm not too opinionated about it, but you can set it up. So in the settings, you can decide on what duration you want to keep the sessions. So you could delete them on, you can literally write the days. So you could do 7 days or 10 days or 14 days, kind of depends. For Heidi, we don't access your sessions at all. So it's just for your eyes only. So that's part of our privacy and security setup. And when or the automated deletion deletes it, it's gone. Like we can't recover it. You'll see in the product feature requests, they ask for, is there a way to restore sessions? I accidentally deleted one. It's like, sorry, we can't. Like it's permanently deleted, it's gone. But yeah, it is tricky. I think what Ian said, it'll be a sentiment thing. It's almost like police body cams or something. I think eventually people will feel comfortable with the idea of having these transcripts as evidence of the practice. Because it's useful for coding, it's useful for a lot of things. But obviously that's, yeah.
But I'm thinking it can also work both ways.
Oh, yeah.
So we are assuming we are good doctors.
Mm-hmm.
We try to put medicine. If you actually make a mistake, right, and it's not recorded, and the patient knows about it,
Mm-hmm.
they go, and they have one to request that, then you should. And the biggest appeal, you have to be able to do it or not.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's where it's what you feel comfortable with. So yes. So if it's still in Heidi and there's a subpoena, yes, like that would be a discoverable thing.
So if I destroy it, but then somehow because it's criminal or something, need evidence, you were saying that no one can request it.
No. So yeah, it's not linked to your account. Also, all the reason that we let you delete in the first place is because the transcripts are not considered clinical notes because a clinician hasn't reviewed them or created a note out of it. It's just a stream of a conversation. And 3 patients could say the exact same thing, like the exact same transcript, and have entirely different clinical notes. So the clinical note is the clinical record that under Australian privacy principles you have to store, can't destroy, etc. Yep.
Sometimes when I do the hiding, it's a rubbish, right? And it says use up stuff, but I can't be bothered to actually do the hiding if I just pick what I want, put it in my record, and keep my record. So I'm treat hiding like my own. Is that correct? Like it doesn't need to be accurate. I mean,
Yep.
as long as what I put legal, that's just.
Yeah, I would treat your medical record as your record. Yeah, yeah. And most clinicians, they don't, unless you're like writing like identifiable data in every single it's very unlikely there's a real way to link it back to that patient. Obviously, there is potentially. So it just depends what you're comfortable with. Maybe you just set it to automatically delete on a 30-day basis or something, because it's like, you know, how likely is it that you remember something 30 days later that you're still going to need it for? So there is some hygiene, like in the setup. That's probably a good idea. But yeah, part of me feels that like if you look at in 5 years' time at like all the litigation, it probably ends up being net positive for most clinicians that they had that transcript versus not. But it is unknown. Yep. Yeah.
I've got a couple of questions. I'm a GP, but I also have been at the Melbourne University. Yeah, I find that when you start a consult in certain circumstances, getting consent is an impediment, because you may have a crying baby, you may have an extremely distressed person, someone in pain, asthmatic attack, whatever. Is it possible that a patient can scan a QR code in the waiting room, read my words that I would say to them, and accept it and email it? And with your integration, it is automatically put into Heidi. So that's one issue. The second one is that in a consult, wherever we are, we have a lot of things we say to patients that we would like them to do. We tell mothers what may happen to their fathers or mothers or their children. We give them instructions in a sequence of what they should do. Now, is there a possibility that Heidi can, at the end of the consult, generate a task list for the patient?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a handover that we do in a hospital. You know, we expect these things to happen tonight, and this is what you do tomorrow. This is when you come in. This is when you go to emergency or come back.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe I'll start with the second one. So you can already sort of do that. You would have to probably create a template. So you basically set up a template that says, I don't know, patient explainer or patient next steps. So on Heidi, there's a button that says create. If you click create, you don't. When we say template, you don't have to do a lot of work. You can just type in anything you want, and Heidi will do its best job to try to create the right thing for you. So after your visit, if you just typed in, you know, task list for the mum, task list for the dad, it will figure out who's who from the context and generate a really useful task list, I would imagine. But yeah, we are thinking about patient workflows as well as part of reducing the administrative burden. So ideally, it would be a bit nicer than a free text thing you print out. Maybe there's some link you can share with them or something along those lines. For consent, again, really differs by organisation, and the exact requirements will depend on the governance set up. So maybe Royal Melbourne's different from private practice. But we do have a lot of organisations that do that proactively. So in waiting rooms or as part of new patient registration. It doesn't have to be something, it's one of the features you can do in Heidi, so you can have a team and maybe like the admin team can check off that patient has given consent. So you can create the patient in Heidi, check off their consent. And if you do that you can, there's a setting that you can set up that says that they're consented forever. Again, it depends on the organisation. Not everyone wants that. Some want every single time, regardless if it's the same doctor, same patient. But there is a way to do it. it's a little bit of a setup, but we can show you how to do it in the demo maybe. Yeah.
Awesome, thanks, Tom. I've got a few more, and then we'll.
Thanks for the talk, and thanks for the speakers. I just wanted to probably continue with that, because I use Heidi on a regular basis, and I think it's great. But it ends up getting my talk into the patient's discussion, and patient's discussion into my talk. Sometimes there's a bit of cross-talk. I think you mentioned you can teach the system to potentially delineate who is talking, what they're talking about. Is that something we can embed into templates permanently, or should we, like, I don't want to teach this system every time I see someone new, so like I want to really say that this is person A, this is person B, please differentiate, or things like that. And one more question, sorry. Let's say we keep the template, or well, transcribes for a certain amount of time, and then the patient comes back again, same patient. I would like Heidi to basically keep on thinking on that patient's review. Is there a chance we make that happen? And if yes, then what happens to the first template when it's over and done with, and then the system auto-delays the first one? Do they, like, there's a crosstalk? Would there be, at least? Thank you.
Yeah. So for the second one, you can sort of do it. So again, some features in Heidi are sort of hidden because we try not to make it too complicated for the new users. But for every session, there's an area that says patient details, and you can type in a patient name. When you type it in, you can save that patient and associate all future sessions with that patient. So we call it linked sessions. So you're basically linking that session to the patient name. And then when you create the next, so let's say you see someone today, and then you see the same person tomorrow. When you create the session, you just have to type in like the first couple of initials, pick them from the list, and then in the context tab, there's their past sessions. So you can, we'll show you in the demo, but basically if you pick the patient, you can automatically include their past sessions as context. And we've already done the engineering for Heidi to understand that that's past and today is present. And so it does a good job of, where relevant, including historical things that might have been discussed. If it's a chronic patient or their HbA1c levels or their mood, you could track that over time. I've forgotten your first question. Speaker differentiation. So it's a little tricky. So templates are useful if it's like a global thing that happens every time. I think speakers generally not. So my personal preference of the best way to fix it is actually with Heidi. So Ask Heidi is a little voice icon. You don't have to type. You can just do the voice icon and just give Heidi the context. So or you can just click resume and do the same thing. So you can say, hey Heidi, just FYI, like this person was talking about this person was talking about that, and click stop, and it will fix it on the second generation. So it's a bit unintuitive. I think most people think you can only record. But you can, when you hit resume, we differentiate like the session stop and start. So we know that, basically Heidi knows that it's just you talking to Heidi, and so it will reformat. So I think that's the fastest way. The reason we don't do the speaker diarization today, so we don't do the like speaker A, speaker B, speaker C, is because we find that it actually makes the notes worse. It's completely unintuitive, but the speakerization is not perfect. It will sometimes misidentify names. It will sometimes mischaracterize like 3 people instead of 2 people, especially in noisy scenarios. And so it's like it's kind of imperfect. It's never going to be perfect. It's like if there's a medical student that can't see the room or something, and they're trying to just by their ears figure out who's who. So it's actually, you got to pick the lesser of evils. So actually the lesser is to just give it a whole transcript and let the AI figure it out. But yeah, I would suggest resume. That's the best way. Resume, say, whatever's like the mixed up, just give it a bit of extra context. You often don't need to explain every detail, because it's like if you were reading that transcript, if you're like, hey, I was talking about this, B was talking about that, then it simplifies everything after that. Yeah, or like, if it's happening every session, let us know.
Yeah.
It might be a setup thing.
Awesome. Yeah. I've been wrapped for time, so if you have a question, please come up and see us afterwards. You can spot there are plenty of Heidi staff members. We've got a slightly different white badge So please come up and keep chatting to us. But I just wanted to thank Todd, Ian and Charles for their time and their contribution. And thanks, Tom, for taking the tough questions for me. And thank you all for being here. It's really lovely to see so many familiar faces, but also lots of new faces here. And we look forward to doing this again very soon. But yeah, please have a drink. We'll be here for a little while. We'd love to chat more. Cheers.